To me, that's where the magic in music happens. When two people, or at least two people, can match themselves to each other to make something bigger than them.
Hi, and welcome to ForBassPlayersOnly.com. I'm John Liebman, and I help people who've always wanted to learn to play bass, but haven't gotten very far with it. Not yet, anyway. Got a great interview this week. Matt Mangano from the Zac Brown Band. You're going to hear all about all kinds of interesting stuff, great stories, great information for learning bass, playing bass, and some behind the scenes stuff. But first, if you've ever wanted to learn bass, you should know that right now there are thousands of people inside the ForBassPlayers Only community, men and women of all ages. And you know what they're doing? They're learning bass. They're having the time of their life playing music that they love. Come join them and experience that incredible transformation for yourself. You're never too old to groove. So let's play bass. Matt Mangano is the bassist for the Zac Brown Band, as I mentioned. He grew up in Visalia, California, before attending Berklee College of Music in Boston, where he was classmates with Clay Cook, who's also in the Zac Brown Band, and roommates with John Mayer. Pretty cool, huh? After moving to Atlanta to tour with Cook and Mayer, and even appearing in the music video for John Mayer's smash hit No Such Thing, Matt moved to Nashville, Tennessee, where he would go on to work as a studio engineer and live audio engineer with Zac Brown. In 2012, Matt and Zac opened Southern Ground Nashville Recording Studio, where Matt served as studio director until being asked to fill the Zac Brown bass chair shortly thereafter. He is currently on tour with the Zac Brown Band throughout the rest of 2025. Great interview. Here it is, my interview with Matt Mangano. Hi, Matt.
Hey, John, how are you?
Good, good. We're finally here. I know we've been going back and forth for it's going to be a couple of years.
I think so, yeah. I'm not a very good communicator when it comes to social media, so I'm glad we got a chance to actually communicate for real.
Me too. I'm not a real big Facebook guy, especially the messenger thing, but I don't even know how it came. I think that is how I reached out to you.
Could
But
be, yeah.
welcome. Great to have you here, Zac Brown Band, and all the other good stuff. So, uh, I want to talk about all that, obviously, but if you don't mind, I'd like to go from the beginning, your initial exposure to music, your musical upbringing. Come from a musical family? Did your parents take you to concerts? Do you have brothers and sisters playing records in the house? How would you describe that time and what attracted you to the bass?
Yeah, that's a that's a great question. I didn't really start playing music until I had a chance in the school band. So that in where I grew up in Central California, that was in the fifth grade. That was when you got to pick an instrument to play. So prior to that, I had been exposed to music through, of course, my parents had a fun record collection. We listened to, like most people, we listened to music that was on the radio and at home in the car, wherever. I had two uncles who played guitar who grew up. They were from Southern California and they had been in surf bands, Monkees tribute bands. They were actually a part of this. Monkees had this campaign called Last Train to Clarksville, where they would hire local bands to go. I guess it was playing on a train or at a train station, but it was like they would go through the U.S. and local bands would come play Monkey songs. So they were part of that early on. So I always sort of looked up to them when we would have family gatherings. They'd bring out their Martin guitars and play, the oldies. And back in then when I was a kid in the 1980s, the oldies were only, maybe 20 years old. But to me, they seemed like, they were the oldies, Beatles songs, Beach Boys songs. So I can distinctly remember one Thanksgiving where we had gone down to visit and they got their guitars out in my grandparents' basement and just started playing. And I had my dad's camcorder at the time, the VHS camcorders. And so I recorded them playing. It was what seemed like hours of footage, and I took it home after the trip, and I watched it over and over again. And I had just started picking up the guitar, and at the same time I had picked up the saxophone for the school band.
Huh.
And so right around that time I had this video of them. I had some new tapes that we had just gotten from the music store. And so that was my initial education in playing guitar, was learning Beatles songs or Beach Boys songs through them, through their version of it. So those were the first versions of those songs that I had learned.
Cool.
So and then so parallel to that was school band. So I was learning to read treble clef with the alto saxophone, and then read guitar, not tablature, but it was chord notation on
Yeah.
top of the lyrics. So I had that going on at the same time. So, and I somehow, looking back, I think they somehow supported each other,
Sure.
because learning the to read the lead lines helped in those songbooks, that I was learning guitar in. So they went hand in hand, I think.
So what were you playing, like pop tunes and jazz tunes, big band stuff,
No,
or
not even that. It was a church songbook. We had those are the first couple songbooks I had. So, it was non-denominational, late 70s, early 80s, Calvary Chapel Christian church songs. And those were the books that we had. And a funny story from that is, I knew basic chords, G, C, D, E, whatever. And so, and it had the chord diagram with the strings and
yeah,
the dots on, how to shape the
what do they
chord.
call it? PVG in the publishing
Is
business,
that
right?
the name of it? Yeah.
Piano vocal guitar.
What is it?
Piano vocal guitar.
Piano vocal
Those.
guitar, yeah. And so then the chord shape on top, right,
Yep.
with the grid. And
I
so
know exactly what you're talking about.
there was one, I remember seeing a G suspended, right? So I wrote G S U S,
Yeah.
and then and I thought, because it was a church songbook, and I thought, oh, they're being clever. They're saying Jesus.
Oh,
And then I saw the C sus, and I thought, okay, now they're really being clever and playing, and kind of tongue in cheek on this thing. And it was not until a couple years later that I learned what a suspended chord was, and that they were saying G suspended, not Jesus.
that's so funny. It reminds me of how green I was when I first got down to Miami, and I started getting sent to all these shows. And first of all, I said, why does it say BAJO on every page? What is it? Well, Bajo, which means bass. And then the last page, it always said bows. Well, I'm playing electric. I don't have the bow. And why should I? Then the singer would come on and take up bow,
It was both.
bow. So
That's
all right,
good.
we all got to start somewhere, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, so school band kind of made a big impression on me, and I loved school band. So as I got up through junior high school into high school, I really connected with that environment. Became buddies with my band teachers. I loved all my music teachers, and so that was always it was just fun for me. I didn't want to leave the band room. I always wanted to go in there. So when there were spare times at school and we were allowed to, I would go in there and mess around on any instrument that I could find. And so going into high school, I had heard about the high school jazz band, and I really wanted to be in this thing. But as a freshman, you typically didn't get to be in it. So when the band director came to audition at the middle school, to audition, find prospective students, I asked him if I could please be in the jazz band. I, he said, well, what do you play? I said, I play saxophone. He said, well, I already have too many saxophone players. Uh, I said, well, I also play guitar. He said, I've got a guitar player. But do you play bass?
Here it comes. Here it comes.
Here it
Yeah.
comes. But do you play bass? And I said, well, yeah, it's like the guitar, right? And he said, well, It's a little more than that, but if you are willing to learn over the summer, if you're willing to learn to read bass clef, I will let you take the school bass home. And if
Up,
you
up,
can, no, it was an electric. It was an older Yamaha electric bass. I'll let you take it home, and if you practice it, you can be in the jazz band. Awesome. So I took the bass home that summer, and the next time that I opened that bass was on the first day of school. I didn't touch it the whole summer.
I
Uh,
hope it didn't have dust on it when you took it
Play.
out.
Yeah, right. So on that first week of class, he handed out a stack of charts, that big. And I didn't know what I was doing. So I had basically 1 week to take these things home and figure it out, learn how to read bass clef and find my way through it. And that's what I did. And that was sort of the beginning of playing bass for me.
Wow. Yeah, you bring back a lot of happy memories for me. I actually always wanted to play guitar, but I had to play bass in the band. And I went to Mr. Lippa, the band director at my high school. I said, I'm getting pretty serious with the bass. Does the school have a jazz band, a stage band? He says, yeah, but we already have two bass players. And he says, too bad you don't play electric guitar because my guitar player is graduating. He's leaving. I said, oh, I do. And he says, great. And I went out and I bought a guitar and same thing over the summer. And I had to beat out a guy, Howell Selburn. I wonder whatever happened to him, but I got the gig in the band and had a lot of fun.
Band gives you, as a student, I think a healthy bit of competition too.
Sure.
Competing, auditioning for a chair position or, first chair, second chair, or just even auditioning to be in a band. Those are really great character shaping moments, especially losing out on audition,
Yeah.
and then being able to bounce back and still wanting to do it. Um, it's actually a great way to kind of weed out the people who aren't very serious about it too.
That's very true. Hey, I'm just curious with your upbringing on the sax before you started playing bass. It wasn't really a jazz thing you said, but I'm just wondering, were people like Charlie Parker or Paul Desmond or David Sanborn or any of the other alto players on your radar at all?
So the those types of players I didn't really find out about until I was already in the jazz band playing the bass. So, but then I did get into Charlie Parker and John Coltrane, and I love Cannonball Adderley. He's probably my favorite saxophone player. Um, and so I was exposed to them, but sort of through the lens of a bass player and
What?
reading charts or lead sheets, but I didn't ever sit down with a saxophone to even attempt that because by then I had stopped, I could read and I was working on my whatever I had to work on for the marching band or concert, orchestral band. But as far as trying to progress, I was more interested in doing that on the bass.
Sure. Okay. So what about the bass players? Who got your attention? You must have had some bass player influences.
Oh yeah, for sure. So at that age, the first bass player that I knew about, well, no, I will back up. The first bass player that I really kind of struck a chord with me was Nathan East. Um, because I think at that time the Eric Clapton Unplugged was really big, and there was a live Eric Clapton from Nebworth concert that had been running on VH1. And so those, hearing Nathan play on the Tears in Heaven part on the fretless, but then seeing him on the concert, the big stage, playing whatever it was, Bad Love or and
Yeah.
playing killing it on a five string. That was pretty. That made a huge impression on me. And and Nathan's not a flashy bass player at all. And so looking back, I'm sort of surprised that I was impressed by someone who wasn't a flashy bass player because the next guy that came into my view was Victor Wooten, and so which is sort of the opposite as far as how what you're presented on a recording or something like that. So So I think I went from Nathan East to Victor Wooten, and then, you know, uh, like finding Lee Sklar.
I thought you were going to say Lee
Well,
Sklar when you
and
said not flashy, so I didn't realize you were going to go to the other
but
extreme
what's
with it.
interesting is that at the time there were people who I thought were influences, and in a way they were influences, but they were sort of heroes to me. But now I have enough years of experience and of playing to be able to look back and say, actually, Lee Sklar was a bigger influence than anybody on me because those were the records my parents were listening to. They were listening to the Linda Ronstadt greatest hits and the Phil Collins But Seriously record.
Yeah,
And I didn't know at the time who was playing those parts, but those parts come out, or the spirit of those parts come out at certain times. And I listen back and say, "Oh my gosh, that was what he did on that song," or whatever it was.
absolutely.
Um,
What about any Motown on the radar back in those days?
oh
Jimmy,
yeah, of course, Jamerson and Babbitt
yeah,
uh, were the guys, and Motown I think didn't really come into my attention until maybe later in the high school years. Um, that was around the time that Standing in the Shadows came out,
yeah.
and so that of course brought a lot of attention to what was going on there.
I got that book when it came with cassettes,
Yeah, yeah.
then CDs, and now it's all online. Well, what about, boy, I just got to mention that Clapton Unplugged. I played that to death. Andy Fairweather Low and Chuck Leavell, and oh man,
Oh yeah.
just loved it. Still do. I saw Clapton year and a half, 2 years ago, something like that, in Toronto. My wife's parents lived there, so we went there, and I contacted Nathan, and he got us in. And who was Stevie Ray's brother? What was it? Jimmy Vaughn,
Jimmy Vaughn, yeah.
was the opening act for that, and it was some big sports. No, it was downtown, wherever it was. But anyway, I just mentioned it.
Incidentally, all these heroes and influences that I've mentioned are all people who I have seen that you have interviewed on your
Ah,
podcast. So congratulations. That's pretty awesome
well,
that
thank you
you
very
get to
much.
talk to people and get, you know, see so many similar stories and also so many different stories and perspectives.
Yeah, Geezer Butler was different than Charlie Hayden, so
Of course, yeah.
extreme to another. Well, what about transforming all of that? Okay, junior high, high school, and career. Can you fill in some of the gaps? How did your career get rolling? How did you start doing this stuff as a profession?
So when I was about, I would say 14 or 15 years old, I had a neighbor who lived down the street who played drums. He was about, 5 years older than me. And he had started playing in bands. And I think that he knew that I had started playing bass and that I could kind of play. So he had joined a band with a couple guys who were at this time they were in their 30s. So they were in their 30s. My buddy John was 21, and I think I had just turned 16, and they needed a bass player. And so he said, "Hey, there's this kid down the street. Um, he can play. Like, would you let him come audition?" So he asked me, and I went down there and auditioned. And so it was an original band, and it was pop country, and this was about 1991 or 92. So they were writing sort of, they called it progressive country songs at that time. So, which is kind of, it was a little ahead of its time. The format and the songwriting style is kind of what country became maybe in like the late 90s, early 2000s. So I joined this band with these guys, and they were starting to get gigs around the Central Valley of California, and they had connections at different theaters. So we would get the gig opening up, being the support act for the national touring act that would come through. So in Hanford at the Fox Theater or in Visalia at the Convention Center. So when I was 16, I got to open up for, Joe Diffie, Pam Tillis, Patty Loveless, Steve Wariner, many different, at that time, huge country acts. So And these guys, especially the leader and singer of the band, John Paul Lawrence, he taught me a lot about stage performance, how to address the audience, how to address the wherever the attention needs to go on the stage. So when someone's playing a solo, you address them, you look at them, and never turn your back to the audience. Basic stagecraft, but I didn't know any of this, and he had toured and had experience doing that, so he was, that made a big impression on me, learning all of that, and at the same time playing these shows and sort of encountering grizzled roadies, road worn fellas who would, didn't care if that you were a kid. If you're stepping on their cables, they're gonna let you know about it. So
Well, that's valid.
it was a great education. And so, yeah, when I was 16 is when I started playing professionally with these guys, and that lasted for a couple of years. And then I started forming some local jazz groups, and we would play at coffee houses and bars and whatnot. So
All on electric. Do you play
th-
up at all?
this was so I had started playing. I had bought an old K
Ah,
C1
okay.
from, this is a great story too, from a gentleman who, I had a friend in the school band who knew I was looking for a bass, and she said, "Well, my grandpa has one. I don't know if he'd want to sell it, but I bet he would." And so she took me to meet her grandfather, and he was probably in his 80s by then. His name was Manuel, and he had played bass in the 30s and 40s in Mexican groups in the Central Valley. And by this point, he was blind. And so I made him an offer, I think like, $300. And he reluctantly, said, "Oh, okay, I'll let you have it." So he sold me the bass, and I still have it. It's downstairs right now.
A sad story.
Well, it's sad for him, but I think he knew at that point that he wasn't going to play anymore, and he knew it should go to somebody who was going to enjoy it. So, and that was probably 35 years ago. So, so yeah, so I was playing that K at these combos.
How did you learn how to play upright?
I just, I mean, I learned where in tune was and where in tune wasn't, and tried to stay mostly in those spots. And I would watch people's play with, try to get little tidbits of technique here and there just by watching. So I never had any formal instruction on that. At some point, I had bought the Samandel book, but I didn't really want to take the time to learn to bow.
Number one and number two over
You
here.
got them both, yeah. I still have it, and I still need to learn Arco. There are many times where it's popped up, and you know,
So you have a bow.
I have a bow. I have a
French or
French
German?
bow.
French?
I have a French bow, and so I can I can draw it just fine. It sounds, long notes are great, but the acoustic bass is, as you know, it's a very physical instrument, and it requires a lot of maintenance, on your own, with your technique. So, and I do not spend the time to do that. So when it does come up, I usually, if I know that I have something to shoot for, I'll start a month in advance and prepare.
I did that. I got called to do Into the Woods. It was a big thing with
Oh yeah.
Cleo Hay, Stephen Sondheim coming to the rehearsals. And I got out my Samandel book and practiced every bowing as if I was going to have a solo in that spot. Prepared. And I, like a month or whatever it was, like however far in advance I got the call, I got to the first rehearsal and we're all there. And the conductor goes, okay. And I look at the part and it goes, dum, dum, dum. I mean, it did get more intricate than that, but hey, I didn't mind being over prepared, better than
Built
other
up those chops and you were ready.
I was. Oh boy. What is keeping you busy these days? I think I know, but why don't you bring me and the audience up to date on what's happening?
Well, most immediately, my three kids are keeping me busy. My my youngest son stayed home from school today because he was sick. So we were doing Legos today. But I have been the bassist with Zac Brown Band since December of 2013. And we are currently working on I think it's our sixth record as a band, um, hopefully releasing later in the year. So that's been keeping me busy a lot. I help Zach with some of the audio production duties, whether it be editing or just sort of ushering through the different stages. So mix, mastering, all the way to delivery. I help out with that.
You're
So,
pretty accomplished in the recording studio, right? Recording and engineering and all that.
uh, well, I wouldn't say accomplished, but I've been at it for a while. So, um, I started recording around the same time that I was in high school. That band that I was telling you about, that I joined, called Ruckus, was the name of the band. And so the guitarist in Ruckus had a home studio with a Tascam 8-track half-inch recorder. And so that sort of made an impression on me also, and I wanted to have recording gear. So I ended up getting some recording gear at home. I think I got an ADAT and a Mackie mixer at the time. And so I learned recording just sort of on my own. And then when I went to school at Berkeley, I took more recording classes there. So being able to, engineer a session, find my way around on a piece of gear or console or digital software has always been something that I've been able to do. I haven't always been the best at it, but I think I have a good, when you're a musician and you're musical and you understand basic signal flow, I think it's not that hard to get a good sound engineering. So um, I'm being a little modest. I can get a good sound engineering, and I'm fairly proficient at digital editing. So, in as a bass player, I think a lot of bassists have production a production focused mindset because you know as a bassist you understand the structure and the construction of the band and of a song, right? Because typically the root motion or the bass motion sort of drives most of the harmony, which sort of dictates the whole color of the song. Not to mention the rhythmic
Yes.
foundation too. So I think that lends itself to bass players being producers.
I never thought of it that way. That's interesting. My son went to Berkeley, and I lean on him an awful lot. I was using Digital Performer, and he had Logic, and he used to laugh at me. He said, "Just get Logic, Dad. It's so much easier." I got Logic. It's easier, but it doesn't come as naturally as it as it does to him.
They're
Did
all, the DAWs are like playing the upright bass. I mean, they just take up a lot of time. You got to go through all the menus and learn everything and memorize this and that, and
bringing
you
me down, man. Oh,
know. But
I assume you went to Berkeley for a bass, right? You just
I went
also
to Berkeley. I studied bass. Yeah, I studied with Joe Santerre and
he's
Dave
Mr.
Buda.
Mr. Six String Joe
Yeah,
Sanchez.
yep.
Dave Buda, I know. I've interviewed both of those
Yeah,
guys.
Dave was an excellent instructor, and he kicked my butt more than anybody, and I really appreciate that. And there were times where I was slacking as a student, and he called me out on it, and I'll never forget it. And I'll always thank him whenever I see him for that, because it's really easy when you are young, and if you sort of lack self motivation, sometimes even at a school like Berkeley, and it is what you put into it, right? You only get back what you put into it. It's a mirror. And so, it's really easy to get caught up in just hanging out in Boston or, doing other things besides what you're supposed to. Like even getting into recording and songwriting at school, I'm not playing bass, right? I'm learning how to use this recording software or helping my buddy finish writing his song. and I'm not putting in the hours that I need to on bass. And so Dave, you know, rightfully so, called me on that. So it was
Were
great.
you studying any upright at Berkeley also?
No, I did not. I did not
Who
study
George
any
was
upright.
there? Was Rich Appleman there, or was Steve Bailey already there? When were
Yep.
you?
Rich was the head of the bass department. And
Yeah,
I went to school with his son, Tom Appleman, who's
yeah. Oh,
a phenomenal bass player as well,
yeah.
and also on faculty at the school.
I met Tom when he was really little. Last time I saw him, his office is right next to Steve Bailey's. He's doing something high up over there.
He had a really fun band when we were in school, and his band was called Epileptic Disco.
Okay. But hey, I know I'm asking about what's keeping you busy, and I'm taking it on all these tangents. But on the upright at all, what about guys like I don't know Paul Chambers and Ron Carter or John Petitucci or
Yeah, of course. I think that, you know, when I got into jazz, I think one of the first records that I really got into was Kind of Blue. And that's still the one that, to me, it tops everything else because I love that mood. I love the more melancholy feel and sound of that. So Paul Chambers was, you know, the guy. And of course, Ray Brown, um, I loved his playing too. And it was more, you know, it was more, I think Ray Brown was more, how do I want to say it? A little bit more fundamental, where Paul Chambers was really kind of went with, you know, the flow of where Miles was going. Um, but although, I guess the leader of whatever band it is sort of dictates where the music goes.
Well, I get very excited just
But
hearing
Ray
that.
Brown, one of my favorite records that he's on is the Ella and Louie record. Do you know that one?
I'm sure I've heard it, but uh, yeah, actually, I do. It's like a jazz at the Philharmonic
No,
series.
it's not a live. It's a studio record, but the bass sounds so good on that record. It's so rich, and it's so hard to record upright bass and get a really good low end and clear tone on the top.
Yes. So let me get us back to what's keeping you busy. Are you on tour right now, even though you're home? Are you in between? What's happening
Yeah,
with?
so the way that we tour has always sort of been, since I've been in the band, has been long weekend type shows. So typically we'll have a show maybe Friday through Sunday or Thursday through Sunday. So we'll leave out on a Thursday, Wednesday or Thursday. We'll either catch a bus and then we'll go around and do 3 or 4 shows in a certain region and then home uh, Sunday night or Monday morning. Get to be home for a couple days with the kids and then go out and do it again. And occasionally we'll be gone for 5, maybe a week. But and of course, if we go overseas, then we're gone for longer. So it's a really excellent touring situation. I am super fortunate to be able to roll that way. I know folks who have to go out for months at a time, and they only get a day or two that they can actually see their family. So it's not lost on me how lucky we are to tour that way.
Oh, that's great. What about your bass gear? Your do you have one or two basses that you tend to gravitate to the most? And your basses, your pickups, your amps, strings, effects, all that stuff.
Sure.
You
Yeah,
get
I
readers
love.
search into that.
Yeah, I like to geek out sometimes. I have my trusty 1963 Precision, which I bought from my buddy Clay Cook, who I'm in the band with. I bought it years ago, and he had gotten it from somebody in Atlanta, and whoever had it before him had stripped all the finish off and put like a clear coat on it. So, I've definitely taken it apart, and I got into the whole, I went online and researched what all the different telltale signs were that it's an original bass. And I learned about the paint stand holes and how they would stand the body up to spray it, and um, how to tell if it's a two-piece or a three-piece of wood, and all the other markers. So I got into that for a little while. So I love this bass. It's got a really special low end on it.
There's a store I'm sure you're very familiar with in Nashville, Carter Vintage Guitar.
Yes, we love Carter.
My son told me about that, and it just you go in there and it just smells like an old, vintage kind of place. But playing those like 59 P basses, 62 and J basses, and oh man,
Oh
I
yeah, it's
couldn't
excellent.
talk with my wife because she's like, you're not getting
Yeah, they actually recently moved into a newer, larger building, so they've got even more guitars and amps.
it. Boy, that must have been a project to move that.
Yeah,
That's
it's beautiful. They've got a performance space in there now.
a great idea.
Um, yeah, it's excellent. So I've got the 63, then I have a 65 jazz bass in the Sunburst, and this one's really great too. It's just
Is that still pre-CBS or 60?
65 I think they had been purchased by CBS at this point. 65 or 66. So 66 is when you started seeing transitional elements. So like the lollipop tuners that they would call them, right? That had a more rounded top to the tuner. Um, and then I think the finish started to change maybe at some point there, but this one, was still had all sort of still the original Fender specs as far as I can tell.
So you didn't change the pickups or
Didn't
any of
touch a thing. Um, yeah, no, this one's all original. I've got another. I have a cool bass that's it's a 1960 jazz bass that's been refinished by a gentleman who wrote co-wrote the book called The Fender Bass. Um, and his name is escaping me right now, but I was connected to him through somebody else, and so he had this bass that he had refinished, and no, it's all right. So he and this other guy co-wrote the book, and the other guy that he wrote the book with did the refinish job. So he used to work for Fender. So seemed like a pretty legit, refinish job.
There was a book that came out last year, I think, called The Bastard Instrument.
Oh, did they?
Ryan, oh geez, what's his name? He's on the faculty at University of North Texas. Very, very meticulously well researched book. I did an interview with him when the book came out. But who was it? Oh, Jim Roberts. I'm thinking of, there's some pretty high profile uh, bass books like that, like the one you're describing.
Yeah, I have the Jim Roberts book also. Um, yeah, I'll have to look it up and remember his name. But
Eddie Lee's book.
I don't have the book, but our drummer, Chris Fryer, had said that he was going to order it for our bus. So I don't know, it might show up.
Might disappear too.
It might disappear. Yeah. No, you know what? I have the Kindle. I bought the Kindle version of his book.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, that collection is spectacular.
So you've got a P bass, a vintage P bass, and a vintage J bass. Are those pretty?
Hmm. Pretty much in recording, that's what I'll pick up. And then on the stage, I have a good arsenal of Music Man Stingray basses.
Ah,
And when I joined the band, shortly after I joined, one of my bandmates, John Hopkins, had been working with Music Man guitars. So we were out in Central California, and he introduced me to the Ball family, to Brian Ball and Sterling Ball, and I got to go out and tour the factory and get to know those guys. So I've been sort of staying current on their basses. So I've currently playing the Stingray Special basses, which are a lot lighter than the original Stingrays. They've got the 18-volt pickups. I like the the version that has the double pickup, the two humbucking pickups. And I feel like I can get pretty close to a jazz bass sound if I need to, pretty close to a precision sound if I need to. And then, of course, I've got that classic Stingray sound. So I love those basses. They are indestructible. And I've got a couple sets. We have the way we tour, we have to have a primary rig, an A rig, and then we have a B rig, which is essentially a copy of our primary rig so that we can go be doing a show, if we needed to, a show in New York and the next night in Los Angeles. So we would leapfrog our production rigs.
The bongo basses are pretty cool too.
Bongos are awesome. I don't own one, but I would love to. And I got to sit with Sterling Ball one time, who, he developed the bongo with, it was designed, the body was designed by a person who designed BMW automobiles. And, Sterling is a big car nut. And so he just loves automotive design. So he worked with this guy to create a bass that had, sleek curves like a car, like a sports car. And it really does have that, the way the body sort of curves, and then the tone knobs are inset into the body a little bit. And so I had never really given the bongo much thought. And then I sat in Sterling's office with him, and he picked up the bongo and he starts playing it, and he is working those tone knobs. He's cranking up that bass knob. He's like, yeah, you can get a thumpy reggae sound like this, or he cranks up the treble and starts slapping. And I'd never touch my tone knob, like maybe just a little bit here or there, very conservative with it. And he was going wild, just getting all these sounds, and it really blew my mind. I had no idea that people actually used active basses in that way, and it was really cool. Like it opened up my mind to a new way of shaping tone and getting sounds with an active bass.
Why do they call it the bongo?
That's a great question. I'm sure he told me and I don't remember.
What kind of strings do you have on your basses?
I use Ernie Ball Slinky hybrids, so 45 to 105 is what I like.
Do you use any flats on any of the vintage stuff?
I have flats on the 1960. Trying to think if I have flats on any others. That's the only one I have flats on. I do have a 93 Stingray that I have set up as fretless. I don't play it very often fretlessly.
Fretlessly?
Fretlessly. I have two necks for it, so that's why I say sometimes I swap it out for fretless. But yeah, that's basically horrible pun there, right? Basically what I have for my instrument setup. And
what
then
about pickups and amps and stuff like that?
I never got into aftermarket pickups. I know that there's some great ones out there, but I never bothered changing them out. To me, and I know it's valid. I know it can change your sound and make it better in some ways. But to me, it was another variable that I wasn't willing to go into, right? Because you got to take it apart and you got to take it off. You got to spend the time to do that. And I'd rather just try to get it, if I'm searching for a tone or a sound, I can get it with EQ or with a preamp. And I do, all that to say, I understand as a audio engineer that the source is the most important part of the sound. So getting the best possible source is ideal. So yes, having a better pickup, a better microphone, if you will, is always going to help. But maybe I'm being lazy, but I just never really got into exploring that. I do know that some folks make an aftermarket Stingray pickup, and I would love to try those someday in one of my Stingrays and be able to compare.
What about on your upright? You must have a pickup on that, right?
Yep, I've got 2 or 3 pickups on it. I've got I think I have a Barkus Berry I have a realist and a fishman.
It's
All sort of three different views of that sound.
yeah, it's not so uncommon. I interview a lot of bass players, so you're not the first one that's told me that they put more than one pickup on an upright. Realist, that's David Gage, right?
Yes.
And Fishman, of course. Marcus Berry, to be honest, I haven't heard that name in a while. I haven't
Yeah.
heard it in a long time.
You
Why?
know who's got more pickups than anyone, I think, on their bass is Victor Krauss.
Yeah, I just interviewed him within the last 6 months or so.
Yeah, he's got all kinds of contraptions on his.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I think he's like a techno guy.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I love him. He's actually you know, he's sort of influential on me as a player. Um, I met him in town here in Nashville through some other folks, and um, a guy who I had been playing with, a fiddle player named Casey Dreesen, hired Victor to play on his record. And I didn't really know Victor's playing very well. And after that record, I became a huge fan and, in some ways tried to mimic what he was doing.
But to the sound of the upright, what does I hear more and more about the Fishman, and a lot of people that really like the Fishman. But people like David Gage also. But I'm just curious, what is it about the? Is it what is it? The fluency? Is that what it is? The Fishman pickup?
I don't know. I mean, it's the one that I have is so old. It's from probably the 1990s. I don't even remember what it's called.
Okay.
It's got two clips. It goes right on the front of the bridge, and then the jack mounts in between the D and the A string behind the bridge.
And what do you play all that through? What do you use for amplification?
It just depends on what we're doing. So it could be an amp or just a DI. Sometimes I've taken a mic like even SM57, you can roll it up in a towel and stick it right behind the bridge. It's sort of another pickup. I mean, I look at it as all just different points of view of the instrument, right? So a pickup on an upright is so immediate, so you get the attack. I think that the low end from that instrument, where you will get low end from a pickup, no doubt, but the true low end, the really robust round low end, can only be captured with a microphone at a certain number of feet away, because it takes time and distance for that sound wave
The
to
air
develop. That's right.
and any effects?
I've gone through effects, and I kind of, I on some of our records, I've used some pretty heavy distortion at times, or some chorus, and so I have those effects on my board set up so that I can recreate that. But really, I don't turn on effects very often. My guilty pleasure is like an envelope filter, or like an auto wah, like, right, playing Bootsy Collins sounding stuff. But mostly, I won't turn on an effect. Um, every now and then, maybe even and actually, I do use an octave at times, and it's more of just for, I won't put it on for a whole song. It's just for maybe a line or a phrase in the middle of a song to add impact to that moment. Same with the distortion. So it's, I play in a nine-piece band, so there's very little room for, sometimes there's three or four people playing guitar at once. So there's very little room for a bass player to go turn on a pedal, right? That's the last thing anybody wants to do. So there are certain moments where I'm like, I think right now would be the perfect time because nobody's paying attention. So I'll turn on a distortion, or, hit a low octave.
I want to ask you, you have a combination of some formal music training and some figure it out by yourself music training. For Bass Players Only is really a bass instruction site. And right now we've got people from every state in the US and 50, 60 some countries last time anybody counted. And these people are not the people I originally thought I was going to get. I thought I was going to get the 20-year-olds, the kids, but I turned out getting people who are, I joke about this. I say people who are over 40, but most of the people are older than over 40. Oh, I've got people, men and women, in their 50s, 60s, 70s. I've got students in their 80s, and they're not looking to make a career out of it. They don't want to travel around the world playing sold out arenas to their adoring fans. They want to play some classic rock riffs with their buddies, or some blues shuffles, or some funk R&B. Some of them are into slapping, and some of the things that happen to us when we get into our 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, a lot of them have arthritis or the creaky bones in it, that sore muscles. And, I'm just trying to give you a context. I'm not trying to paint a picture that everybody's, old and decrepit, but there is some of that. So I'm telling you all that to just give you a context of who we're talking about, because I want to ask you what advice you can impart to somebody like that who wants to learn bass. When I was 17, my goals were all wrong. I was trying to cop Stanley Clarke licks and Jocko and transcribing Jeff Berlin, Joe Frazier, and just, chops for the sake of chops almost. That's not what playing bass is all about. So what should these people be thinking about? What kind of goals should they be setting in your estimation? What do you think?
That's a great question, John. I think that no matter who you are, the only way that you'll see improvement is through time, putting in the time and the dedication. So whatever it is that you want to learn or feel that whatever, I mean, to me, it doesn't matter what the method of instruction is, as long as there's some sort of guidance. And it's having the personal discipline to put in the time, because you can't get results any other way. So carve out the time, spend the time as much as you can. But I would also say that always remember that we're talking about playing music, and what gets lost so many times, I think, is the word play. When we playing music, I think back to being a kid, and I'm playing, right? It's play. I'm getting with somebody else, and I'm interacting, and somebody does something that lights you up or makes you laugh, or it makes you want to do something back to them, and it's a conversation, right? And I just think that word play and being playful gets so lost now, because everyone's so serious about whatever their style is, or you know how they're learning, what their method of instruction is. So I would say, just as whatever you're doing, make sure it's playful and fun. And if it's not fun, I don't know, do it anyway, but it's better if you're having fun with it. So there's the other thing that I would say is, if you can, find someone else to play with, because you can learn a lot on your own, but I don't think you'll ever go to the next level if you stay in a vacuum. If you just stay by yourself, you need to find somebody else, if you can, to play with, and execute the things that you've learned. And I think that you'll find that things are sometimes different than what you thought. If you're shedding a scale or shedding a part or whatever, you've got it on your own, if you're playing to your click or whatever it is. Then when you get in a room with somebody else who has a completely different sense of time, or a different idea of what it should sound like, it'll open your eyes, and it's not a bad thing at all. I mean, I think it's a great thing to get with someone else and have to be uncomfortable for a minute and adjust the way that you play to match them. And to me, that's where the magic in music happens, when two people, or at least two people, can match themselves to each other to make something bigger than them.
You remember those Jamie Aebersold records?
Yeah.
Yeah, just the rhythm section, and you supply that. So you think you're playing with other people, but you're really not. But
Yeah,
it,
because you do that, and then you go out with the other guys, and it's like, holy, wait a second, where's my Jamie Aersfeld count off? Wait,
and you know, I I started electric bass when I was 15, and I started upright when I was 19. And I was really getting into jazz when I was 19, 20. And the guys that I was playing with had all been playing for a while. So not only was I playing with other people, but I was playing with people who were a lot better than I was, which was probably not as much fun for them. But I can't tell you, you can't help but learn when everybody around you is so much better. It just forces you to become better. So I think you raised a very good point there. I'm glad you mentioned that. And the other end of that spectrum, there are some students. I don't know if it's a lot, but I've got some students that are perfectly content just sitting in a room at home by themselves and just shedding and just practicing and just figuring it out. So
and
if
that's great, and I guess I'm coming from a performer mindset. So, but you're right about that, and I think that a lot of I've run across people who are maybe discouraged because they say, oh, I wish that I would love to be able to play piano or guitar or bass or whatever it is, but I'm too old. And I always think, no, you're not too, I promise you, you're not too old. If you only knew that all it took was just sitting down with you know, a little bit of time, give yourself time, you can do it. And you're right. There doesn't have to be anything more than just being able to play for yourself and just the satisfaction of being able to do it.
Yeah, I hear that a lot. Oh, am I too old? Am I too old? You're not. I don't know how old you are, but no, you're not too old. And I've got this student, and this student is 80, this student is 82. And they're doing it. So try it. See, if you're too, and oh yeah, but then come the yeah buts. Yeah, but I have arthritis. Yeah, but I have this. Well, I've got this student who has arthritis, this student who had shoulder surgery, this student. I'm not saying you can do it, but I'm saying this is what I've seen. So give it a try. And sometimes you need to make accommodations and you have to hold your bass a little differently or position your arms, your hands, your fingers a little differently.
I
And
always say that all you need is two things to play the bass. You don't even need fingers.
what do you need?
I mean, you could have a stick taped to each arm and just you could make a bass sound. You could get some notes out of that. I had to one year
Funny too.
I had I used to cycle, ride bicycles, and I had a bike wreck and I broke this thumb on my left hand, and so I had to have surgery. I had a tour coming up, and so I asked the surgeon, like, is there any way I'll be able to play with the cast? He's like, I don't know. I said, well, so I got into the details of how they were going to cast my hand and where it could, you know, I was trying to be able to do this tour. I had to work. And so he he let me bring my bass into the clinic when they were going to cast my hand after the surgery. So I put it on and I said, okay, I need it to be like this. He
Wow.
says, okay. And so I said, is that acceptable to you, Doc? And he said, okay, yeah, we can do it like this, but the thumb has to be a little bit more out. So we, I set my bass like this, and I kept my hand in that position, and then we went and did the cast right there. So I had it cast in this perfect little pocket where I, could do this, and I didn't really have to put much pressure on the back.
I love
And I did a tour. There's photos out there somewhere of me.
I did a couple of interviews with a guy named Dr. Randall Kurtz, Randy Kurtz.
I've heard of him, yes.
He's a chiropractor, he's an acupuncturist, and he's a bass player. And it seems to me, I think I remember him saying, if you're not sure, take your bass to the doctor's office and show the doctor. So I love that story. That's great. What about the future, Matt? I know you've got the tour and you're busy with the recording and the band and everything else, but is there something else that's either percolating up in your brain or something else that you've always wanted to do that you just haven't gotten to yet?
Well, I love recording music with other people. I have some friends that I've sort of made, written songs with or produced music with over the years. And when the band is off and we're not doing anything, I love to get in with folks and help. I've never released anything on my own as a solo artist. I like to help other people make records, and so um, you know, to me, that's kind of how that's where I do my best, is helping someone else figure out the components and the path to getting a recording done. So I really want to do more of that. And I have some projects that I'm working on right now are that I'm excited about. I've got a friend who's an amazing vocalist here in Nashville. She sings backgrounds for everybody, and she's also a vocal coach. And so we've worked on a song that hopefully will get released here soon. And there's a band from Georgia that I just recorded yesterday, and we had a lot of fun recording a band, live. So yeah, on that front, that's definitely what I want to keep doing. Of course, improving as a bassist, you know, I try to find the time every day to do something. Um, Trying to find new ways of, challenging myself. I'm very interested in the Jeff Berlin controversy, and his concepts and the opposition. But I do whatever side of that coin you land on. I do. Hearing Jeff's perspective makes me want to go, improve my reading and my own personal timing. So that's out there.
He's
Uh,
been down in Nashville for quite a while now.
he has, yeah. I've never met him, but I know folks who have.
Dinner with him last time I was out there, and of course, spirited discussions ensued.
Sure, yeah. A gentleman who I take bassist to for a setup has taken a lesson with him before, and just said how much it changed his playing, how much it opened up his playing just by taking a few lessons. So
I was really honored when my bass aerobics book came out, and I said, "Would you consider endorsing it?" And he was, "No, nobody gets music education like I do. There are only like two other people in the whole world, or three other people in the whole world." And then he got back to me several months later, and he says, "John, I looked at this and I really like it, and you get it, and this is a good book, and I would like to endorse it." I said, "Well, thanks. The book is already out, but there's a second edition coming. Would you care to write the foreword to it?" And he did. So Bass
oh,
Aerobics
amazing.
by Hal Leonard, forward by Jeff
I'm
Berlin.
going to need to get that. It's interesting, and congratulations on that, by the way. Um, my kids all have, we started the kids on Suzuki method strings. So my
I always
son,
think of violin when I hear Suzuki.
yep, my son did violin, and then my daughter did violin also, and I had my third son did cello. And they it they did fine. It was such a chore to get them to practice, and it was a battle. And finally, I said, you know what? When I was a kid, my parents never made me practice. Not once did they ever say, "Go in your room and practice your whatever bass, saxophone." I just wanted to do it. I did it because I wanted to, and I was tired of battling with my kids to go make them practice. So we stopped all lessons, and I said, "All right, we're going to start over. You guys pick an instrument, whatever you want. We will find an instructor, and that's what we're going to do." And they all chose piano, and they all chose the teacher that teaches music at their elementary school. And she's also a piano teacher. And these kids come home from school and they fight for the piano. it's a battle. My two youngest kids, they are, shoving each other off the piano bench to try to play their parts.
Well,
And
that's easy. Just get two more pianos in there.
yeah, right. But I realized that two things that make a difference. One is the method, right? Whatever the method is that this woman is using is good for them because they're progressing and they're learning and they're enjoying it. But the second is the teacher.
Mhm.
Like the having the right direction and personality to guide you, especially as a kid, I think makes such a huge difference because you could have the most amazing teacher in the world, like as far as like skilled teacher, right? But if you don't like that person and you don't connect with them, you're not going to want to do the things that they tell you and you won't progress. But if the person teaching you has a connection with you and is able to make you enjoy it, you're going to work more. Going to want to please them and do well to impress them or whatever, and you will practice more. And I think that the teacher is huge.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, Jocko was a great player, but he didn't last long at the University of Miami. Although I was privileged to go to his house, and one time in particular, I asked him to show me the fingering to Teen Town. It was, I said, "Oh, I thought it was like this." He said, "No, this is how you do it." I said, okay. Hey,
That was
I,
before video cameras, right?
yes, yeah, I didn't. Yeah, it was before everything. Well, he
Before everything.
died at 87, so yeah, it was before all that. Hey, one last question. I've kept you so long. I just keep firing questions because you're such an interesting fellow. But I have one final question for you, Matt. What would you be if you were not, oh, excuse me, if you were not a bass player? Something outside of music, if you can imagine. I'm sorry about off. Oh,
I think that I would do something with architecture, possibly a landscaped architect. I just love, you know, I love the idea of being able to draw things at just the right scale. First of all, like and neatly and orderly, and but design always just sort of has piqued my interest, and especially I love being outside. Like I hardly want to be inside. I want to be outside every time we're on the road. Like that's where I am is outside, and I'm a hobbyist gardener, and um, one of my interests is native plants. So that I think combining all of that would be fun.
interesting.
Yeah,
That's
it's very
interesting what I learned.
oddball, but
Thank you so much. I
you,
kept
John.
time, and it's been great. I could keep talking to you all day. So
Yeah, same. Yeah.
let me know when you come through Michigan.
Yes,
Some-
sir, I will. I think actually in a couple weekends we might be there. So I'll send you a message.
Awesome. I will watch for it. Thank you
Good.
so much, Matt, and everything that you've done, everything you're doing, and everything you're going to do. We'll keep
Thank
up.
you, John. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you and your listeners.
My pleasure and an honor. Take care, my friend, and
All right.
hope to cross soon and often.
Yes, sir.
Thanks.
Bye.
Interesting guy, interesting stuff. I hope you enjoyed that interview. It sure was a lot of fun for me. I could have gone on talking to him all day. Matt Mangano of the Zac Brown Band. If they come through your area, check them out. You know it's going to be a lot of fun. If you've ever wanted to learn bass, you should know that right now there are thousands of people inside the For Bass Players Only community, men and women of all ages, and they're learning bass. They're having the time of their life playing music that they love. Come join them and experience that incredible transformation for yourself. You know, you're never too old to groove. I'll see you right back here next week, same time, same place, with another bass player interview here at ForBassPlayersOnly.com. In the meantime, I'm John Liebman. Let's play bass.